conversations for change because the world is ready. Today, I'd like to talk about the power of letting go, or the real work of surrender. I think these are both really coming to mind for me at the moment because I'm doing some inner work in a pretty intense way this summer that I haven't done in quite a while. And that work is giving me the opportunity to look back and to see some of the ways that I have moved through changes and experiences in my life in the past, and how letting go and surrender have fit into those experiences. And one of the things that's become very startling and easy to see is that there have been times, multiple times in fact, in my life when I was at a place where something new was beginning that I was unaware that it was about to begin. Something new was starting in my life. I knew something had to change. I knew there was a new sort of world coming for me, but I didn't know what it looked like or how I was going to fit into it or what I was supposed to do about it. And so in those situations, in those instances, as I was looking back and seeing how my life had shifted in these ways that were unexpected and that had really taken me to the next level of what I was ready for, that in many cases they had these components in them where something would happen that would cause me to have a response, an emotional response, which would cause me to actually really want something or not want something, or experience deeply the emotional and heartfelt feeling of the thing that I really felt I wanted. And then it would be disrupted, it would be interrupted, such that I would forget completely about it. And I wouldn't ruminate on it. It was not, I'm not talking about times where I had thought about something and meditated on it and worked on, quote unquote, creating it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where I had literally let go or surrendered the idea almost in the moment of its inception sometimes, simply because life happened, things shifted, situations changed in such a way that my attention was brought to something else. Um, and this was particularly true during the years that I was a single parent, because as a single parent, you always have too much going on. And so it's not hard to get really focused on something and then have a complete shift of your attention and emotion in a new direction because something else calls for that. You have to do something with the kids, you have to, whatever it is. So that is sort of what got me to thinking about this in this new way of really understanding the mechanism of surrender and of letting go, because I could see very clearly a couple of very powerful instances in my life where I had been through an experience that caused me to get very clear about what I wanted. And I had spoken that clarity with deep feeling and emotion. And then I had simply let it go. I had stopped thinking about it entirely because something else was more important in my world at that moment. And I didn't have the bandwidth to continue to think about it or do anything about it. And that seemed to become a pattern of creation, because I can see exactly in those moments where that happened, that within a very short period of time after that experience of being so deeply and emotionally connected to an idea, a longing, a vision, a desire, a something wanted in my world, and then abruptly having it interrupted so that I didn't think about it, it manifested almost magically, and it manifested almost instantaneously. And the more I've looked at this and the more I've thought about this, the more it's led me to understand something about the mechanism of what it is that we do when we are creating as creative beings in a creative universe, in a co creative universe. And I want to talk about that because I think most of us have it wrong. And I would say for myself, from my own experience, I've gotten it wrong plenty because I have worked so hard to make things happen. And the more I have worked to make things happen, the less they've happened. Whereas in those instances where I have simply gotten real clarity, especially through my heart and through my emotional being in my body about what it is I want, and been able, simply through circumstance sometimes, to let it go and forget about it, that in those moments and days and weeks afterwards, those were the manifestations that came into being easily, effortlessly, as a surprise. And often they were very big, meaningful, and momentous creations in my life. My current, now almost 30 years marriage is one of them. That gives you an idea. So, what is this thing about letting go and surrender? And what I want to say about it is, I think part of what it is that it's the difference between the heart and the mind. And it's the understanding, the combination of that awareness that it's the heart that knows what we want, not the mind, and an awareness that the part of the creation that is our work is identifying what it is that our heart is asking for. And the part that is not our work is figuring out how it's going to happen. And I think most of us have fallen for that trap most of our lives because the culture we live in is all focused on the mind. It's all the left brain work. Make your lists, make them detailed, make them long. And I'm not saying don't do that. But what I am saying is once you've made your list and you've made it long and you've made it detailed, make sure it lines up with your heart and then put it away. And remember that the universe is who brings you what you want, not you. And as I've thought about this and I've contemplated these situations in my life, I've also been able to see the places where things didn't work out, where I didn't get the thing I thought I needed or wanted in the moment, or even in the long term. And I've begun to understand that the more effort and more importance and more focus I put on those things, the further away they went from me. So in a way, you could say that undue focus and attention on that which we're working to create in our lives actually creates the resistance to us receiving that which we are seeking to create. Why is that? And I think part of the answer I'm discovering right now as I'm doing some new work, and that is the further we go down the road of getting clarity and defining with our minds the importance of what it is we think we want to create, the more attached our ego becomes to that outcome. And the more attachment we have, the less able we are to allow the universe to bring us what we want, because we've now decided we know exactly what it has to look like, and we know exactly how it's going to happen. And all of those things we know literally become a fortress around us that keep us from that thing which we would call wanted. And that is why the power of letting go and surrender is so important. Because when we learn to step into trust and to knowing that everything we desire in the universe desires us, and believing that, then the world is our oyster. We get everything we want, and we get it fast. It doesn't mean we don't have to work on our own resistance. It doesn't mean we aren't always becoming better, more greater possibility thinkers, more loving, more connected to unconditional love, and more able to release the energies of clinging to that the ego falls into as default. Sure, we have to do all of that. But what it does mean is that the more we step into the place of trusting, the more we can literally float down that river. And the river takes us really directly to what we want. And I came across a word recently that made me have a light bulb moment, because I realized this word is actually describing exactly that process. But it wasn't designed to do that. The word was developed as a part of systems biology to explain how the natural world operates. And the word is autopoiesis. What does that mean? It literally means self-creating, self-regenerating. And it describes how ecosystems and biological systems in the natural world on this planet recreate themselves automatically, naturally. It's simply what happens. It is what's responsible for your body being able to heal a cut without you doing anything. And it's also a perfect description of how we create as conscious living beings. Because autopoiesis means self-creating. It doesn't mean sitting down with a pen and paper and writing a thesis about how you are going to create something. It literally means the creation will spring forth from within you. And that is exactly what happens when we learn to let go. When we learn to surrender completely in trust to the nature of our being, the universe responds and brings us that which is wanted. But it cannot do that if we are running the energy of resistance. And what does that mean? What is the energy of resistance? The energy of resistance is doubt, questioning, fear, lack. All the egocentric ways that the mind will come in and undermine what it is we have decided is in the best interest of our heart and our well-being. And unfortunately, because of the culture that we have all been surrounded by, immersed in, and living in within the last centuries, our natural tendency within the culture is to question everything, including our own impulses and desires. So we're not really very good at stepping back and trusting the universe to bring us what we want. But what the science is now telling us is that is exactly how this system works. If we want something, our only requirement is to be clear, to identify it with the knowingness within our heart and our being, to add the emphasis of our great emotional body, of what that feeling is that makes us want that thing, of what that feeling is when we imagine having it to such a degree that we step into the vibratory frequency of the having of it. And in that moment, our work is done. When we can trust that, and we can believe that, and we can practice that, we begin to see it happening all around us. And when I began to look back with this kind of thinking over the decades of my life and all the things that have happened, what I realized was that the connecting thread between all of the magical, mystical moments was that in the moments just before they happened, I let go. I stopped being attached to outcome. I stopped trying to figure out how. I surrendered into the moment, and I did what was in front of me. And I did that right after I had some kind of an experience that caused me to get very clear about what I wanted. And quite often, those experiences that happened that brought that about were not positive experiences. Quite often, they were experiences that brought up my feelings of frustration, of irritation, of being limited, of not being able to move forward, of anger, of completely of limitation. And in those moments of feeling that way, I found myself reaching to get out of it by thinking about what I did want. Or I was put in a situation where I didn't have the luxury of allowing myself to wallow, if you will, in the negative emotion because of circumstances around me. And so I simply switched into a place of naming what I truly wanted because of the situation and putting all of my focus there. And when you have young children, that often is what happens because you don't want to be the example for them of what isn't wanted. You want to be the example for them of calling forth what is wanted because you want to be that example for them. And for me, that was a very powerful tool. And looking back, I can see time after time where simply by finding myself in the place where I had to make a different choice in order to maintain a level of upliftment as the role model, I stepped into calling forth what I wanted. And then let it go, set it aside, because I simply didn't have time to keep thinking about it. The next thing in my world had already shown up. And that is the power of surrender. That when we can do that, we literally take our hands off the steering wheel. We let go of the reins, and the universe is free to respond to us. and bring us what it is we've asked for. But if we're holding the reins and holding the steering wheel and trying to drive the vehicle that's going to get us to where we need to go, more often than not, we're driving in the wrong direction. Because the harder we hold on to that steering wheel, the tighter our grip, the further away that thing that we say we want moves from us. Why is that? Because our grip is the evidence of our lack of belief. Our grip is the evidence of our lack of trust. Our need to control is the evidence that we don't believe it's possible without our effort. And that is the entire message of the magic of letting go and surrender. And that's another reason, I think, why it takes us sometimes a lifetime to learn. Because we have been so convinced, not only by our culture and our family and our peers and our own experience, that the only way we can get to what we want is through hard work and pushing and elbowing our way through the crowds, when exactly the opposite is true. And it makes me think of something that has come up over and over again in the work that I have done in the Dr. Joe Dispenza arena, because he talks about it as well, and I've seen it so many times, where somebody goes into this work, in that case, the work of Dr. Joe Meditations, in order to heal something. And that something is usually a big something. It's a diagnosis that's big and scary and has the potential to end your life often. And when they get in there and they get really into the process of doing the meditations and shifting the way they feel, quite often they go through a period where they no longer care about the diagnosis. And he even has complained sometimes on stage that he wants them to talk about the big change they've just been through, right? They got their vision back, or the cancer diagnosis went away, or whatever it is. And they're just so happy they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about where they came from, because they have moved into a whole new place. They are now in alignment with the desired outcome of their joy and their co-creation with the universe. And that is no longer, that old picture of what was wrong is no longer a part of the energy that they're running. So they're not even interested in talking about it. What I see when I look at this whole idea of surrender and letting go is that whole perspective that we are moving from when we are in the midst of that shift, where rather than it being the focus of our attention, it simply falls away and is no longer what our attention is on. Whether it's the healing we're looking for, or the fear of the disease that we are so sure we need to heal, the outcome that we are hoping for, or the pain of what it is that has driven us to want that outcome. Either side of those two extremes falls away from us as we surrender and let go, which opens up the space for us to step into a new place. And in that new place, suddenly, we become emotionally, vibrationally, and in every other way, a coherent match to what is wanted. But often, we don't even recognize that moment because our attention is elsewhere. Because when that thing that is most wanted or most dreaded is no longer running our energy and got control of our attention, then there's room for something else to move into that space. So the moment you look away and start on some other new adventure, major or minor, doesn't matter. Because in the moment that you let go of it, the energy can rush in and fill that space you've just let go of. And that's what I see over and over. And that is the evidence of how this autopoiesis works. That it's not our mental focus that brings us the creations, the joys, the wonders that make our life worth living. It is our trust in who we are as co-creators in a co-creative universe that allows us to receive energetically and then physically, spiritually, emotionally, and in every other way, the object of our desire, not through how we think it will happen, but almost always through some way that we were not expecting. And it's that not expecting that is the giveaway. Because we're driving down the road, headed off in the next thing that's got our attention, and suddenly there it is, that thing that we were so sure we'd given up on. And it just lands easily, gracefully, without any work at all. Because we have surrendered. And so the shortcut for this whole process is to simply acknowledge that it was never part of the work we were meant to do to figure out how. Which many of us have heard, but most of us have not been able to wrap our heads around. But when we understand that the creative system we are engaging in as physical living beings on this planet is this creative system, then finally we can make sense of that. And we can understand that just in the same way, when we get a paper cut on our finger will heal. We won't go on bleeding forever. In that very same way, everything in the universe will conspire to bring us exactly what we need to heal every part of ourselves, of our lives, and of all of the parts of our creation that matter the most deeply to us. When we begin to trust and allow those things to be brought to us as a part of the natural order of this living system. But so long as we are fussing at the cut and doing things to it and opening it up to see if it's healed yet, pulling back that piece of skin, we're simply delaying what's trying to come to us. It's a powerful lesson. And I would suggest that all of us have experiences that we can mine, for lack of a better word, in our own lives, where we can look back and find examples where we have, whether consciously or simply through a matter of circumstance, let go of and surrendered something that we really wanted and seen it show up unexpectedly in a way that we could never have imagined, simply because we took our attention off of it long enough for the universe to bring it to us. That is the power of letting go. That is the power of surrender. It's not giving up. It's inviting all of what is good and right and true and beautiful in the universe to remind us who we really are.